bass and drum going around like bum bum bum.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, got it locked all over the nations. Stay fresh, keep it laced in my basics. Better hit it off, got these other people gazing. Fresh threads and I sure look amazing.
When I go bum bum,
let's go.
For your business to grow profitably, you need flexible funding solutions that keep cash flowing. To seize opportunities, you need a local funding partner that moves as quickly as you do. And to succeed, your funding partner needs expert experience in small to medium business. Bibby Financial Services supports SMEs worldwide by unlocking their cash flow and their potential. Unlock your potential with Bibby, a better funding alternative.
Government's rejected suggestions. The offshore processing
was taken from a property at Zilmere by a woman yesterday afternoon. Officers say it is a matter of extreme urgency that he is returned to safety. The toddler is of Caucasian appearance, has a slim build with blonde hair and blue eyes. Anyone with information asked to contact Crime Stoppers. Rock and roll great Lou Reed has died at the age of 71. Lou Reed gained fame as the lead singer of Velvet Underground. He later had a string of solo hits in the 1970s, including Take a Walk on the Wild Side. The cause of his death has not been revealed, but the artist underwent a liver transplant in May. At least 41 people have been killed in a series of car bombings across Iraq's capital. The neighbourhood of Shab in North Baghdad was worst hit, with 2 bombs exploding in a commercial area, killing 8 people. Meantime, at least 18 civilians have died in a roadside bomb blast in central Afghanistan. The victims, mainly women and children, were killed when a packed bus was destroyed on the way to a wedding in the Ghazni province. At least 10 elite New South Wales police officers have been sent north amid fears bikies in Queensland may shift their operations south of the border. There are fears gang members will flee the Sunshine State under the Newman government's unprecedented new laws on bikie crime. There are reports Queensland bikies are considering establishing chapters as far away as Perth to escape the crackdown. The United Kingdom is bracing for one of the worst storms in years, with heavy rain and hurricane-strength winds forecast in the coming days. Gusts of up to 130 kilometres an hour are predicted to lash the southwest coast of England before moving north and east. Transport services may be badly affected amid fears of widespread damage. Sport: New Zealand's won its opening match of the Rugby League World Cup, 42 points to 24 over Samoa, despite a remarkable error from Kiwi forward Sonny Bill Williams. And the weather: hot in the north, warm and showery in the east, and a cooler, gusty change crossing the south.
This is AM Agenda with Kieran Gilbert.
Hello and welcome to the program. The government has rejected suggestions the offshore processing facilities on Manus and Nauru have reached their capacity. The Immigration Minister has told Sky News that arrivals are down 70% in the last 5 weeks that Operation Sovereign Borders has been in force, and he says the offshore facilities on Nauru and Manus are being expanded to accommodate any more arrivals.
They're not full. Well, I should stress that they are not full, and as we've said at every single briefing, we have capacity to deal with anticipated arrivals. And what we're doing is we're expanding those centres on both Nauru and on Manus Island. I've been to both of them in the last few weeks, and we will have an additional 400 plus beds available at Manus by the end of next week, I'm advised, and we're rapidly expanding the facilities on Nauru as well, where there is more room at this current point.
And with me on the program this Monday morning, the Shadow Minister for Citizenship and Multiculturalism and the Assistant Minister for Communications, Michelle Rowland, and also the Parliamentary Secretary to the Treasurer, Steve Ciobo. Steve Ciobo, first to you, how much credit do you give the former Labor government for the decline in the boat arrivals that we've seen over the last month?
Look, I don't really give them any credit. Look, we were elected, Kieran, to do a job, and that was to repair the mess that the Labor Party left behind when it came to boats. So we know the story there. Labor left us a situation where they took a solution and created a problem over 50,000 arrivals, over 700 boats. Now, Labor pretty much adopted more positions than the Kama Sutra, and they're now going to claim that they were the architects of a slowdown in the boats. What we know is that we took strong, consistent policies to the election. The Australian people endorsed us at that election, and we think in the fullness of time they will see that under the coalition, once again, that we have slowed down the boats and hopefully will stop them in time.
Scott Morrison's refusing to say whether any boats have been turned back, in fact refusing to commit to ever revealing if boats were or have been turned back. Here's a little bit more of Scott Morrison speaking to Chris Kenny last night on the Viewpoint program.
Business of holding big, bold claims about this stuff. We're in the business of actually just getting the job done. And that's what our focus is on the moment. And that's why we're not into a running commentary on it. We're just getting the job done. People want the boats stopped coming to Australia. That's what we're elected to do. And that's what we're getting on and doing.
Down 70% the arrivals in the last 5 weeks. Michelle Rowland, I'll repeat that. So whatever they are doing seems to be working, down 70% over the last month or so.
The reality is, Kieran, we simply don't know because this culture of secrecy that has beset this government and this minister in particular, I mean, you see his weekly press briefings, they're an absolute farce. They won't say what country of origin people are coming from. They won't detail anything which should actually be transparent and which the former government did detail. And I would point this out, the reality is that this government is implementing the policies of Labor. And the only thing that has changed is the media management, which has moved to a culture of secrecy. Now, it's fair enough for them to say they went to the last election with certain policies. Well, what policies did they include? That include buying back boats. How many boats have they bought back? That including giving money to Indonesian fishing villages. How much has been given over? That included not only turning boats back, buying boats, but also a range of other measures. And the only difference we have actually seen is that they seek to introduce temporary protection visas, which we know from the evidence only increased women and children getting on boats. So I fail to see how this government can take any credit if indeed boat arrivals have come down, because we simply don't know. Every question that's put to the minister is referred to as an operational matter, but this is simply a process of implementing the former government's policies.
Steve Ciobo, when it comes to the reason given operational, this is an operational matter in the specific instance of turning back the boats, that's reasonable in the short term over the weeks around an operation, but months ahead, surely the government can divulge some of that information.
You know, I reject categorically the shrill claims that Michelle's making about, there being a culture of secrecy. What rubbish. I mean, let's be clear, Kieran, about what's going on here. We were elected to do a job, and that was to clean up the mess that Labor left behind on border protection after adopting all manner of policies ranging from, people's congresses to having agreements with Malaysia where we'd give them 800 and we'd take 4,000 back. I mean, all sorts of crazy policies. We made a very simple statement that we would stop the boats, and we'd do it through temporary protection visas, turning back boats where it's safe to do so. On a number of these fronts, we already are making significant inroads. We've seen a very big reduction in the number of boats coming to Australia. So there is no culture of secrecy. Yes, granted, we now do a weekly press conference where we answer those questions. And so from a government's perspective, the time will show us whether or not we ultimately are successful in stopping the boats. We know that we've slowed them down significantly.
Okay. Let's move on. I want to move on. Let's talk about the Audit Commission. The ACTU,
sure.
Steve Ciobo, calling for an early disclosure of the report. They want a bit of input into this. Isn't it fair enough for groups, interest groups, not just the union movement, but anyone, to have some sort of input into what is such a far-reaching
Sure.
Commission of Audit?
Look, of course. I mean, we welcome input, and there no doubt will be a public debate that runs parallel with the Commission of Audit over the next several months. So, look, from my perspective, we welcome everybody to have their say about what they think should be taking place. In many respects, that's what government's all about. But we're not going to slow down the process of reforming government. We're not going to slow down the process to find efficiencies and productivity improvements that need to be found if we're going to get spending under control, and if we're going to get government back on track to restoring Australia's bottom line.
Is there any prospect of an early disclosure of the report? Joe Hockey indicated that it would be released around the May budget, and
Sure.
the concern seems to be that the recommendations will be released as they're being adopted.
Well, I mean, it will be part of the budget process, Kieran. The Commission of Audit has got a very big job to do. They've got to look at the governance of our nation. They've got to look at where there are opportunities for there to be efficiency gains, where we can deliver services in a more productive way for the Australian people. Now, obviously, that requires some policy incorporation. That will be done through the budget process, and so we will release their recommendations, and people, of course, will get to see the government's response to it as part of the budget process that's going to be taking place in May.
Michelle Rowland, Steve Ciobo as Parliamentary Secretary to the Treasurer, with sounds that he's willing to be, and the government's willing to be consultative. Do you support that?
Look, I think it's very important that the public has their say on this before the proposals are actually acted upon. I think it's very important that before any of this is actually put to a budget process, that there be transparency, not only for people who represent the unions, as the ACTU has asked for, but also other levels of government, for example, and the public generally. For example, I note in the Commission of Audit's terms of reference that there is a reference to state and local governments. Now, as someone who comes from a local government background, I'm very concerned that local government should not be the end point of any cost shifting, and that is certainly something that's happened over the last couple of decades. And I would also point out that it was only in our biggest period of reforms in the Hawke-Keating years, when we had unions, businesses and governments coming together over the Accord, that we enjoyed some of the highest levels of productivity, low industrial disputation and economic growth in Australia. So I think it's only proper that we have a transparent process before it actually goes to the budget process. I don't see how this would in fact be slowing down this Commission of Audit, which the government is intent on doing, but I think it's crucial that we have public consultation into this, because we know that that achieves the best outcomes.
Steve Ciobo?
Well, look, I mean, I think Michelle's endorsed what I said. There will be public consultation. There's opportunity for people to have their say, of course, about any decisions the government makes. And as I said, I expect and anticipate that there'll be wide-ranging discussion around the Commission of Audit running parallel with the Commission's operations themselves. But that notwithstanding, make no mistake, Kieran, the coalition government is going to be a very different government to the former Labor government. We've got a job to do. We're going to get on with making decisions in a methodical way. There's not going to be the same showmanship that there was with the previous Labor government, but by the same token, as a consequence of a more, I guess, intensive and directed approach to governance, we're going to get the runs on the board, and we're going to do it in a safe pair of hands kind of way. And frankly, it stands in contrast to Labor, who might have been big when it came to consultation, but were very poor when it came to delivery.
David Rowe in today's Fairfax papers has written a story, Steve Ciobo, that says, quoting a leading US commentator on foreign policy, and suggesting that Tony Abbott's use of a Washington Post interview to brand his Labor predecessors as wacko and embarrassing, that could set back the working relationship with the Obama administration. Did Mr Abbott go a bit too far in his his frank assessment of the former Labor government in that interview with the Washington Post? Aren't you meant to rein in your criticisms when on the international stage?
You know, I think, Kieran, the relationship between Australia and the United States is long, it's enduring and it's robust. The reality is that the friendship that we have with the United States is perhaps the strongest friendship that we have with another nation state. And frankly, if people are genuinely concerned about national embarrassment, then I think the cold hard reality is this. Labor was the international embarrassment because they kept changing prime ministers. We had a situation where on a world stage, people people wouldn't know who the Prime Minister from Australia was that would be turning up, to important trade talks or to important bilateral or multilateral discussions. So frankly, I think if we're quite genuine about what is going to cause international embarrassment for Australia, that past track record now needs to be left behind us. We need a strong, stable pair of hands, and people have that with Tony Abbott.
And it wouldn't take much research, would it, Michelle Rowland, for anyone in the US who was inclined to look to see what Tony Abbott's views were anyway on his predecessors?
Well, maybe they could look up Wikipedia, like some of his ministers. But I'll make this point, Kieran. Look, it is absolutely breaking Rule 101 of international relations to be going around trashing former governments. Prime Minister Gillard and Prime Minister Rudd didn't do that. And for a right-wing commentator to actually wince when these words were said, calling his predecessors wacko, calling previous policies wacko. I'll address both of them. Firstly, I'm sure he was being advised, this is what the Tea Party people in the US will like to hear. Well, quite frankly, it just demonstrates that this is a person who is not a statesman. He wasn't a statesman when Prime Minister Key addressed the Parliament some time ago. He wasn't a statesman when President Obama addressed the Parliament, both times using the opportunities to have a political dig, which was totally inappropriate, which wasn't a problem then, but it's a problem now that he's actually the Prime Minister. And I'll also make this point, attacking the NBN for ludicrously, as he says, wacko, in a wacko sense, seeking to put fibre to every home, just ignores the fact that the United States has a culture, a cable culture. This is a culture of people who have had contestability in this area and really would have been left scratching their heads on a policy issue as well as on a personal issue to think, well, why would this person A, be criticising what is a very sensible policy, and B, why is he criticising his predecessors?
The debate that keeps on giving, and this is the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Simon Benson reports Steve Ciobo that Qantas and Jetstar have confirmed for the first time that they would fly services out of Badgerys Creek. That's a bit of a positive endorsement for something that your boss, Mr Hockey, is seeking to pursue.
Look, we know that second Sydney Airport's a vexed issue. It's not straightforward, Kieran. That's the reason why I guess the debate's been around for, I think, 20 odd years. The reality is, though, that we need to look at what we can do to make Australia more internationally competitive when it comes to tourism. We need to look at what we can do to boost productivity in our nation. Now, quite clearly, having additional ports of call, having additional opportunities to strengthen our national infrastructure when it comes to transport, freight, cargo, all those types of things are all going to be a shot in the arm for the Australian economy. They're also going to be good, strong anchor points to help drive tourism, both domestic and international, which is all part of stimulating economic growth in this country. So from a coalition perspective, look, I welcome the comments from Qantas. Obviously, there's still work to be done ultimately about what will happen with the second Sydney Airport site. But fundamentally, I think that any steps that, as I said, that help to bolster national infrastructure are a step in the right direction.
Michelle Rowland, as a Western Sydney MP, what are your thoughts on this? What would be a big boost to the local economy as well there?
Kieran, I've long been an advocate for employment growth in Western Sydney, but I think this debate has become somewhat skewed to think that an airport in Western Sydney is the only way we're going to achieve this. Firstly, I'm in support of a second airport in Sydney, and I think that Wilton as a site was examined. Those findings would be in the new minister's hands now, but I would point out the fact that getting into the city from Western Sydney and from southwest Sydney is a major trauma already. Now, unless we have significant investment in road and rail and other forms of transport infrastructure, simply building an airport in Western Sydney will not work. And I'll also point out that I think there are tremendous opportunities to develop land in Western Sydney for employment growth. Here where your studios are in Macquarie Park is a fine example of that, and I would certainly like to see more high-tech jobs come to Western Sydney. But I think that it is certainly the case that we can't have an airport plonked in Western Sydney without a significant amount of investment in infrastructure, because otherwise we already see Sydney bursting at the seams. Otherwise it simply will not cope.
Michelle Rowland, Steve Ciobo, thank you both. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kieran. Have a great day.
A quick break on the AM Agenda program. I'll be joined by the Assistant Secretary from the ACTU, Tim Lyons, to discuss exactly what they're after when it comes to input to the government's Audit Commission.